Okay guys, welcome back to the channel. This is going to be part 2 of a series I started a few weeks ago where I introduced you to the audiophile electrician Rex. We did an interview as well as some preliminary footage from my house where he kind of did a diagnosis. And this was part of a several-day visit. He came down to Houston from Seattle and spent time at my house, at 3MA, and one of my friends' houses. He also picked up some new clients. So check out part 1 to get more acquainted with him. He was also the guy, one of the guys involved with Michael Fremer's house. If you heard about the deal he had with his power delivery issues and how it was solved. So, you know, Rex is pretty acclaimed now in the audiophile industry in terms of helping address power from everything on the other side of the wall. And that's what I'm going to showcase today. Part 2 of what he did at my house is basically taking some more measurements. I showed in the first part the measurements of my grounding rod, and the resistance there looked really good, even though there's still some things that I could do better. The breaker box is now where he wanted to take some measurements of the power coming in, as well as measure at the dedicated line. And he's got a meter that can show the distortion and the sine wave and whatnot. And it's not so much about finding things that can create audible changes in your system. Again, for the most part, your power supplies will be able to deal with a lot of these things. But if you are going to get neurotic about certain things, these measurements and things that you want to look at can tell you how neurotic you should be. In some cases, like in the case you're going to see today, my power coming into my home, my breaker box from the street is perfectly fine. Certainly within tolerances that any power supply can handle easily. And also, when he measures on my dedicated line before I turn any gear on, it's not having any impact from the air condition, Wi-Fi, anything else in the system. It's perfectly clean for the most part. So the only thing that we did find anomalies to is when I turn on everything in my room, then back at the breaker box, you can see those draws on the line. And so it makes me pivot a little bit from my general recommendation that I've had. Still, my general recommendation is to get a great power distributor or a power conditioner that doesn't restrict the power to your amps and have everything on that one circuit. Ideally, it provides the benefit of grounding and solving ground loops more efficiently than other means. So if you can put everything on one power distributor, power conditioner that doesn't negatively impacting us, which is a tough thing, but watch my inacoustic and other videos for more on that. But really, the one thing I am going to pivot on as probably the next level up from that general recommendation is getting more dedicated lines. Because what we did notice is that I have a Shunyata Hydra and the inacoustic power conditioner all plugged into my 20 amp line. So that's a lot of things plugged into the 20 amps. And I have big subs plus big amps. And so all of that draw on that power is probably not the best possible. I'm not hearing any negative effects, but it would be interesting to have more dedicated lines. Now you do, again, have that trade-off of, are you going to introduce ground loops with more than one line? So that is something you want to have an expert electrician involved to make sure you don't involve that. But one thing I did notice is that whatever was plugged into my Shunyata Hydra was putting more anomalies back on the line at the breaker box than the gear I had plugged into the inacoustic. Now, whether that's, I don't think it's due to anything in the power conditioner itself. It's just the nature of the gear plugged into it. And again, we're looking at how it's affecting the power at the breaker box, not after the power conditioner, which is what these things are meant to do. But it brings up the macro point that I've kind of made before. What you really want with a power conditioner or a power distributor is really, you don't need, a lot of people at least don't need, like myself, don't need regenerators, batteries, or any kind of conditioning of the power coming in. If you have a dedicated line or good power coming into your breaker box, for the most part, as Rexel mentioned in this video, the total breaker box and bus kind of absorbs the issues and provides you pretty clean power. And very rarely are you going to have these severe situations where you might need a battery or power conditioner. And those still don't solve the main problem that we're evidencing here. Once everything is on and drawing on that single dedicated line, then all the other equipment is being influenced by what else is being drawn on that line. So the same thing could be said for batteries or regenerators. Each outlet is not supplied in like a battery by separate batteries. So everything plugged into that battery supply or a regenerator is influencing the power draw from everything else pulling from it. And so the isolation between outlets is the most important thing. And many power conditioners almost provide no isolation, or whatever they provide doesn't tangibly change the measurements. And you can do this yourself and measure that. And you'll notice that a lot of these companies don't show how it isolates between outlets when everything is plugged in and powered on. You rarely see that measured. You just see them say, here it comes in at this and here it comes out like this. When everything's plugged in, how does everything on influence the other outlets is a key thing to look for. See which companies do that or not. Like I said, I've had good success with the Inacoustic and plugging everything into one power conditioner and one distributor with quality power. A dedicated line is probably most people's, best you could do. But if you can dedicate more lines, if you have lots of big subwoofers or lines, that's probably going to be my next level of trying in the power delivery area to see if there is any improvement. Because what we have shown with these measurements, and I'm going to show you excerpts in a minute, that the dedicated lines themselves are pretty clean and insulated from everything else in the breaker box, which I did not expect to see with actual measurements. And this is, again, why people who say measurements don't matter, really are just clueless. You have to sometimes use measurements to see if you even have a problem. There's a lot of companies and marketing that's going to make you neurotic. But if you don't even know if you have that problem, you don't need this solution, especially spending millions of dollars on stuff. I'm exaggerating here, but some of these power conditioners and stuff cost a lot of money. So choose wisely, choose what will work for your specific needs, and have expertise like somebody like Rex to help give you that guidance if you don't have it yourself. And again, he is available for consultation. Don't just, guys, you can't just call it for free advice. It is going to be a consulting thing. Now, if you are a member of my channel and in my WhatsApp group, he does provide some free advice and consultation for free. So feel free to do that if you want. But, he is available. I'll put his contact information in the description below. But enjoy this, and then I'm going to have part 3, 4 of what he did at 3MA and my friend's house. So stay tuned.
It doesn't look too bad. I mean, there's a touch of ragging up on the top, but not much. And then I go over here, and there's a little spiking going on in there. A little bit of stuff I'm seeing up there. Let me see if I go into...
And that's prior to me turning on the stereo.
Yeah, let's go into power harmonics. So 64 hertz. I want to get the harmonic distortion not off amps. I want to get it off volts. So very typical. 2.6% total harmonic distortion.
Okay.
Up here, like I see that pretty much in every house.
Okay.
Every house. I never really see less.
Okay.
And it looks like on here that it's mostly on the third. The first is your fundamental.
It's the third harmonic?
So it's the third harmonic.
Okay.
You got 2.6% on your third right there.
Okay.
So that's where it all is. And I mean, you can see it more accurately if you put your cursor on and travel it, but
yeah. So again,
let's...
in some cases you don't need power regenerators or anything. If your power is pretty good already, you might see less of success with those things.
So, alright, so I just checked again what side this phase is. So this is a little the point of when you've got a line from your audio equipment and it's distorting the waveform. when you get into the main bus, and this is off the A phase, the whole of the power coming in here now is able to absorb that noise, right? But if you have other equipment that's attached to this line, it's now dealing with this inside of the fundamental waveform.
Okay.
So that's part of the reason I advocate additional circuits. And people will say you want to have more for your amps and your front end and stuff like
To
that.
separate the gear further.
To separate the gear further. And it's also a reason that maybe you want a little larger busing in your sub panels and maybe the feeds that go to your sub panel, because you're giving more wire and current capacity to absorb that type of noise that's coming from here. Because as you can see there, you just don't really see it.
Right. But when gear is interacting with other gear,
yeah, once we can take another reading once you turn everything on, but you know, this interior in there is affecting your front end gear and your other amplifiers and stuff.
okay.
So, and you'll see your equipment does this too, especially amps. They have, you know, as you take the AC power and you bring it inside and then you put it, rectify it down to DC through a diode, and then you put all those capacitors in there, it's doing the exact same thing.
So it'd be interesting to take the feed out of from the after the inacoustic.
What are you saying? Which one?
Like, can we look at what happens after it goes through the inacoustic?
Yeah, we can look at both. You can look at an amp with through the inacoustic or not through the inacoustic.
Okay.
But it's just kind of the point of that's part of the reason why I like in more power lines out to your equipment, so that your equipment can have a clean piece of wire back to the bus, because
Right.
the bus is absorbing
Absorbing
all
the
that
noise.
and giving you power on a more clean waveform, instead of everything being on one wire and all of it having to deal with that
Gotcha.
dragging and spiking, like that spike right in the middle of the power.
So that is good that people probably do overlook, and another way to get, quote, power conditioning in a superior way. All right, sounds good.